part of our memory verses there in Romans 1:20 and Psalms 19. We must remember that our information from the creation, natural revelation is limited to certain characteristics of the cause. Most of our information comes from the Bible. And so that just kind of is going to this source. It says of what we witness in nature. That Psalms 19:1 on the side, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his hand." So it says, little children and unbelievers have at least one question in common. If God made everything, then who made God? And that kind of goes back to the comment that Bryce was making, to wrap our mind around who created God. And so the answer that he has here is, we must believe that God is the uncaused cause of all things. And that's where we struggle, right? Because we're human. We just can't grasp that. But that's not unique to our relationship with us and God, right? Like he says, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. And so there's just an understanding that we're not going to know everything. And even in our day and age, in our lives right now, if you're specialized in something, if you're specialized in medicine or psychology or neuroscience or a teacher, you're going to come to an acknowledgement that the more you get better at your craft or your trade, the more you don't really know that much. And I feel that like so regularly in my life. And I think it's one of the things I kind of say regularly too, is like the more I feel like I'm learning, the more I realize I know nothing. And I think that's so true. The next argument here is the teleological argument, and this is what they would call the watchmaker's argument. This is the argument which is based on the evidence of design in the universe. If there is design, then there must have been a designer. Paley pointed out that a watch requires a watchmaker if it would be unreasonable to create such intricate and precise workmanship by chance. And there is so much depth to the teleological argument, right? I mean, we could spend, that whole book right there is pretty much dives real heavily into that exact type of question, the technicalities of just how precise things are when we think about the universe, when we think about the human body, when we think about the molecules and molecular structures of things, when we think about just our water cycle and all these things, that they're just so precise and so different and so vast. All right, and then he talks about these examples from animals. He kind of goes through the teleological argument and its design, looking at animals and looking at the human body. And then he has one more argument here, and it's called the moral argument. The moral argument, sometimes called the anthropological argument, states that there is within a man a moral nature, and there is a moral order within the universe. This involves the fact that men everywhere have an idea of what ought to be done in certain circumstances. This is some kind of sense of fair play. You took my seat, that's my ball, and he even references C.S. Lewis here, calls this the law of human nature. And that doesn't happen from unintelligent matter. You don't have this ingrained conscience or moral compass from nothing, right? Even people that are even like criminals have codes and ethics and morals within their criminal syndications, right? And so to have moral agency is one thing that, how does that come from nothing? And so then he creates that, he discusses that argument there. I'm going to read this quote from A.E. Taylor. It says, men may draw the line between right and wrong in a different place, but at least they all agree that there is such a line to be drawn. And that's really telling, as well as you get into this moral argument. Okay, so I'm going to go into these questions right here on the bottom of page 18. The top questions are there for you. There's this one question at the bottom. I guess I didn't put it on the slide. It says extra research. I only got a few minutes here, so I'm going to try to go quickly through this. It says each class member should search through some books or magazines for at least one example of design in nature or of man's moral nature. It can be like There are some examples: global cooling, global warming, climate change, God's in control, murder, abortion, stealing, all these things that are happening within our culture being discussed today. I have a few verses here. If you want to just write down as a side note, as a sidebar, I have Jeremiah 4 through 1, chapter 1, 4 through 6. I have Psalms 139, 13 through 16. I have Psalms 127, 3, and Exodus 20, 13. And those are kind of various verses that are kind of talking about these things. So I'm going to read to you real quickly this article. The article is titled, "This is the Way God Made Me, a Scientific Examination of Homosexuality and the Gay Gene." So the Human Genome Project was initiated in 1990 by the U.S. Department of Energy and National Institute of Health, NIH. It has also involved hundreds of scientists in different organizations worldwide. The primary goal of this project was to determine the entire sequence of the DNA found in the human cells. In addition to DNA sequencing, the project goals included identifying all of the genes in the human genome, developing the development and improving techniques for gene sequencing and genetic data analysis, sharing the data and technologies with the private sector. So what happened in 1990 is they wanted to map out the entire human genome. And when Samson went to do his genetic testing and we found that he had this genetic syndrome, there was a specific marker in his genetic code that was called out. It's like F11, blah, 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 and it's all these numbers. Well, all of that mapping was able to be accomplished with the start of this thing. So this article talks a lot about what happened with them being able to map and when it was completed. And then it goes through various arguments of them looking for the gay gene, right? Because if someone is born a certain way, if someone is, this is the way I'm born, well, the question was, can that be found within genetics? Can that gene be found? Can it be identified? And so you got all these pages of this discussion happening and all this scientific analysis going into mapping the human genome. They even look at the brain, different ways that the brain functions. You have all these big name scientists going back and forth trying to identify this. Well, when the completion of the genetic mapping was to be completed, there was going to be this big celebration because there was going to be evidence and proof that there was a thing such called as a gay gene. I'm going to just read to you the conclusion since we're right here at the end. It says, here's the conclusion. It says, consider the obvious problem of survival for individuals who allegedly possess a gay gene. Individuals who have partners of the same sex are biologically unable to reproduce without resorting to artificial means. Therefore, if an alleged gay gene did exist, the homosexual population would disappear altogether. We now know that it is not scientifically accurate to refer to a gay gene as the causative agent in homosexuality. The available evidence clearly established that no such gene has been identified. Additionally, evidence exists with documents that homosexuals can change their sexual orientation. Future decisions regarding policies about and or treatment of homosexuals should reflect this knowledge. And so basically, by the time they got to 2007, there was no way to prove such a thing. It just comes down to our moral agency and how people choose to be. And this was done through like the NIH and the Department of Health. And so the Department of Energy. So this just kind of shows like how much resources they put into this. And the conclusion is there's no such thing. There's nothing that can prove that to be a thing. And so when people are talking about, this is the way people are born, this is the way it is, there's got to be some kind of evidence to that. And when you start to really look into those things, you start to realize there's not. Okay. Thank you for your class. Yes, sir.